guys. Let's turn to Genesis 35, and we'll read verses 22 through 29. Like we did last time, we're going to be looking at this next section here for the next few weeks, and it's actually a review of Jacob's life, and I'll show you the slide here in just a little bit. We're going to be looking at several instances in his life, and hopefully to derive some truth and some meaning for us through that. So it certainly has done that for me. But could somebody read verses 22 through 29?
And it happened when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard about it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Benjamin. Zebulun. Issachar and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, were Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. Then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kirith Abah, that is Hebron, where Abram and Isaac had dwelt. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. So Isaac breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried.
Good. Thank you, David. All right. Well, what's behind this section here that we're on is just the fact that we've arrived at this time in Jacob's life. Older, he's well seasoned in his life, and through hearing this response or hearing these actions of his son, what he did, we're taken back by his response or lack of response. And so, we're not really calling a timeout, but we're putting this in context with the earlier Jacob. We're trying to look back at his life and kind of try to understand what has happened in this man's life, just simply because we're so taken back by his response here, how he handles this situation or doesn't handle it here in chapter 35. So last time we were together, kind of introduced this idea that the reason that we feel like we're taken back or left hanging, I use that term, is just simply because we have a construct in our heads, and I think it's generally true, that we believe that growth in a person's life, natural growth in a person's life, should be on an ascending line, the heavy blue line there, and it should be building towards something, and that something is predictability and order in our lives. We're trying to improve, and it's certainly true. I don't deny that one bit, but what life has taught us is that life forces come in. I don't have that slide here. Life forces come in from the top and can dramatically affect the trajectory of that arrow. And when something we get a curveball thrown at us, and it changes that trajectory, what we think life ought to be, we ask all kinds of questions, and of course the natural response is we want to fix it because we want to return that trajectory to the way we think it ought to be. So when we see Jacob not respond to his son, we go, gee, why isn't he trying to fix it? I mean, that's just our natural response. So there's that in review. But what I'm proposing is what Steve has referenced here this morning are these circles. And guys, you got to understand, this is out of my head. I mean, it's certainly in alignment with other sources, but I didn't come up. I mean, I came up with the circles and the colors and the idea of growth not being a linear action like that, but actually a conglomerate of various stages or circles. And I'm going to submit that to you as at least where I stand at this point in my life. And what we're going to do is look back into Jacob's life from chapter 25 to 35, those chapters, and I'm going to take the liberty to plug in how Jacob illustrates these circles of growth, these stages of growth, as we go through it. And I think it'll become apparent whether you agree or not. I don't know, but it has helped me understand this whole subject of growth. For many years, I would have believed, although I never stated it quite this way, that when one becomes a Christian through a prayer, through a receiving of Christ, that we move from, as the scriptures say, from darkness to light. And the way I interpreted that in my head is that we were a bad person and now we're a good person. There's this, and what experience has taught me over the years is not necessarily true. I am a redeemed person. Yes, I am redeemed, but what happens and how does this whole thing of growth and development happen? We call it transformation. It's a transformational process, and I think probably all of us in this room are at the stage of life where we realize that it's not a one-time thing, but it's actually a process that we go through. We could be a Christian for many years and still be a very bigoted, narrow, hard to live with individual. And this model explains why that is. Or we could actually be a believer for a very short time and be a very loving and caring and Christ-like individual. And this too explains this. Now I want one more thing to say here, is that I'm not excluding the original model, the original construct of the arrow. I think this, even though you don't see an arrow on this screen, that this includes that former model. So anyway, let's move on. We're going to look at stage one. As you could call them circle one, stage one. That's in the center. And so we're going to look at stage one, and we're going to look at how Jacob illustrates stage one and talk about it here. So there's stage one, and I realize you can't see it. I'm going to blow it up here. But here, back in 25:26, it is the birth narrative of Jacob, stage one, and it's where Jacob grabs the heel. There's his first action. He grabs the heel of his brother. And we're going to use that as an illustration of stage one, which is the first stage. And I would say every human being, again, this is out of my head, my opinion, every human being begins at stage one. Grabbing of the heel. Here's the text, and we're going to follow this same model for all 7 stages. You're going to see, I'm just going to plug in different texts and different, there's going to be a text, an action, and a key concern for each of the 7 stages. So here's a picture. Here's stage one, arrow, and the key text is Genesis 25:26, and the action within the text is the grabbing of the heel. And the key concern for stage one is the issue of survival. It's survival. And of course, any of us that have done any work as far as human development, we can picture Maslow's hierarchy of need, and that's at the very, it would be at the very bottom. As far as that's got survival, the primary needs for food and water and oxygen, and I think, is shelter in there, Steve? Either or 2.
If you come from North Dakota.
Okay, well, and Maslow's hierarchy is one model. Guys, if you go out there and look, there's several models in this whole thing of human development. Sometimes there's only 4 stages. Sometimes there's, I think as many as 15 or 16 stages. But you know, I've kind of settled on 7 to represent this idea. But regardless of what model one adopts, it is an amazing the amount of correlation in these models and where they all end up. And that's where we're going to go. So here, this is about survival. Now I'm going to take some time and explain this slide because there's a lot of new information on here, and this new information will be repeated for each stage. So I want to explain these terms to you. You're going to notice that the slide is going to say stage 1 or the appropriate stage when we get to this section of talking about the stages. And I divided the stage into two sides. There's what's called the authentic side, and there's the adaptive. And let me explain it, what I mean by that through my little term here, seed coat. Because in the physical world, in the physical world, we all know what a seed is. And a seed can survive for years and years and years within a dormant state. And it has an outer shell on it, relatively hard in relation to keep things from coming in, keep unwanted things in, and that's called the seed coat. It's the coat of the seed. And that seed can remain like that within that dormant state for years and years. But once the seed is placed in a nurturing environment, in a place where there's moisture and food, that seed coat begins to soften, and what is called, it germinates. I mean, it opens up and it begins to live and grow. I would like to suggest that we're going to use this illustration for each of the stages, because my belief is this, guys, and this is where there may be a rub. I believe we are brought into this world innocent. And what culture and our surrounding environment, just the way it is, begins, and our reaction on that, we begin to build a seed coat around this precious seed of life. And we build it around that. And naturally, and this is subject to every human being. This is how I understand the challenge of what we would call the fall of mankind, is that no one is immune. Everyone will begin to build this seed coat for protection. The only way through that is the death experience, where we allow the seed to open, where we allow it to let go, we embrace it, we face it, and through that facing and embracing and allowing it to let go, the seed coat is broken down and true life can spring forth. And this is the essence of the gospel message. That is the reason Jesus came to die on the cross, to give us this provision and this ability. Not only did he pay for our sins, but he exemplified the model of which we walk. And I'm suggesting there is a death experience, a breaking of the seed coat for each of the 7 stages. And so when I talk about the adaptive indicators, it means, what does the seed coat look like in this stage? What has to be broken down? And when I talk about the authentic indicators, what does this stage look like if it's in a healthy state? You see what I'm saying? The authentic, who we really are as a human being, who God has made us to be, versus who we have adapted by placing this seed coat around us in order to self-protect who we think we need to be. So there's going to be the authentic, which is natural, and the adaptive, which is what we do to protect in order because of various reasons. So eventually, so we got the authentic and we got the adaptive. And what is motivating that from down below are two things. And this is how I think we end up. Every human being, in my belief, we end up in one of two camps. One, on your left, is an active, what I call an active trust in God. This is where I come up against kind of our traditional evangelical message where we think a prayer brings us in, and that's trusting God. It is trusting God. But I believe that to be a follower of Jesus, it's an active trust, moment by moment, a daily trust. It's engaged. Some would call it radical trust. Or the other side is that we end up in this camp, and we are depending on our human resources and our own abilities. And I think we can be very Christian in our theology. We can be what we would call a saved individual and be operating very nicely out of this camp over here. Thus is what the transformation is all about here. So we're going to be looking at each of these. So what does stage one look like? Well, the basic core idea of stage one is a feeling, an inner feeling of safety and security, and that I have enough. Now, that's really hard for many millions of people on this planet in developing countries, just having food and water. The basic necessities of life. But I would also, and it's hard to go beyond that until those basic needs are met. I fully understand that. But conversely, that is not our culture. We live in a different culture. And I would venture to say there are many, many, many people in this nation that have plenty of food and plenty of water, but they're still operating under the adaptive side, living in fear, anger, or shame, because they have a belief in their heads that they are not safe, they are not secure, and they don't have enough. I mean, it would be hard to argue against that. The excess of materialism in our culture. And I would say within the church, guys, we can be in the faith, but still operating very strongly out of the thing that I'm not safe. This world is not safe. I am not secure. I don't have enough. I need more. And this is motivated out of I have to help. I have to step in to do things because I don't have enough. Do you understand what I'm saying, what that looks like? Yes?
I think it's got to go a little further than that. I mean, the world isn't safe. And for me to feel safe has to, I mean, the earliest Christians always have to go to that level of, I know that my Redeemer lives, I know there's a resurrection, I know the things ahead, and lean on that for my security, not to be reckless, but that if things are taken from me, it's okay. In other words, the old idea of fear of what's going to happen, well, put in your mind, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? Lay it in front of you and say, with Jesus, is that okay?
Well, I think
once that's okay, you're not scared anymore.
I think you're expressing exactly this. There's got to be, in the realities, I can live, I have the ability, and you have the ability to live in an unsafe world, but yet still feel safe and secure because our security is elsewhere.
I mean,
it is placed in a trust in God.
Right, because if the worst thing they can do is kill me and that doesn't scare me, I'm bulletproof.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's.
Well, that's
yeah.
pretty noble. I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't always walk that
Yeah,
way,
but,
that's fine.
but where the rub comes in, and guys, I have struggled with this, is then if I have this faith in God that ultimately things are going to turn out okay, why do I have so much inner anxiety and turmoil?
That's still a question.
See, that's the rub here. Yeah. Or why do I feel in shame all the time? If God is my provision, if He has paid for through Christ, paid for my sin, why do I feel guilty all the time? Why do I feel that when I sin, I have to hide from God? I have to move away from God. It's because we're operating on a daily basis, operating at that particular moment from this circle.
Well, that, good.
Yeah.
What?
There's a couple other dynamics here. One is society. I think we get pounded on quite a bit to be afraid of this and be afraid of that.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Because bad news travels twice as fast, or there's some statistic that bad news travels faster than good news, and so you need to be afraid of this or afraid of that or afraid of ISIS or afraid of, it's just a ton of that in the news.
Yeah.
And then I think there may be mental health issues too, where people just aren't processing the data correctly. And so yeah, I have odd conversations with what I consider to be very conservative Christian friends, you know, who feel like they need to have a gun because the world's not a safe place.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling them they're wrong.
No.
It's silly, but I walk away thinking, I wonder if they're right.
Di-
And they don't come up with, you know, I don't come up with anything conclusive from that.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting mental
It-
gymnastic to go through.
It's a fantastic subject, and you've named it very well, Bob. You've brought the rub. You know, do we carry a gun or do we not? You know, and then this whole thing of how resistive or how passive should one be? Well, I don't have the answers for those things, but what I have come to believe is that ultimately I line up one of two ways at any given moment. Either I'm trusting in my own resources and my own abilities because of some and you're going to see this on every slide, fear, anger, or shame. I've identified three motivations that drive this adaptive kind of thinking. Fear. Am I fearful? Do I feel the grid is going to be attacked? And I need to take action on that. I'm in this realm where I hear this quite a bit because it's part of my business. I was with a couple yesterday in our office, and they're really upset at us because they feel that we're lousy company, lousy service, and I think that it goes back 3 years, and I think I can't really argue with a lot of their criticism, but. We sold them some batteries, and what has happened is that one of the woman, she has taken on this project to nurse these batteries, and she's got it in her head that the batteries were programmed with their charging parameters and so forth, and there's a lot of technology here I won't get into. But she feels basically that our guys set it up incorrectly at the get-go. And she's got pages and pages of documentation of taking the readings off the batteries, every cell, and talking to the battery manufacturer and so forth. And of course my question was, well, how often, because if batteries fail, they quit working. Right? If your batteries are dead in your flashlight, you turn on the switch and it doesn't work. And what would indicate low battery performance is that in their particular, they've got a photovoltaic collection system that charges batteries, and if the sun does not give them enough power, then there's a backup generator that that comes on and charges those batteries to keep them healthy and all that. And my question was, well, how often does your generator run? Expecting an answer, every day for hours. Because the idea of a failing battery system is that your lights and things will work. Now these people are not connected to the grid. They make their own power, and during the Sunday everything would work, and then about an hour after the sun goes down, the generator would come on. That's what I would expect. And I said, how often does the generator? It never runs. Your generator never runs? Well, does your system shut off and you lose all your lights? No, it runs just fine. But they've got it in their head. She's got it in her head. She wants a new, we are guilty and we have not set it up right, but yet for 3 years it's been functioning and it hasn't affected their lifestyle at all. What do I do with that? That's a construct, and I can't change that construct, Bob. If you've got a Christian friend that says, I'm going to carry a gun, it's fruitless to try to talk that person out of it. Because what we believe is what we believe.
Similar story. With a nice, wonderful couple. If they're very much into defending yourself and living in a world where you're living on green, things are safe, but you're yellow. Things could be dangerous, better be trained with. You've got to be trained, ready for a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And we're talking, this was the first 2008 election with Obama and stuff, and they said, what's going to happen, this and that. And I looked at him kind of laughing. I said, you mean you wouldn't joyfully accept the confiscation of your property? I don't know why that came.
You just decided it was appropriate for the time?
And he looked at me like I was nuts. Where would you get that idea? I looked at him and said, I think it's in Hebrew somewhere, And he looked at me and says, no, I'm not going to joyfully accept the confiscation of my property.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't either. But that's what these people got to, the Hebrews touts as noble souls.
Uh-huh.
They joyfully accepted the confiscation of the property. Holy cow, where am I in that spectrum?
I've come to the belief, and I think we all have to come either by default or by design or by intention. We all come to a point where either we ultimately believe everything's going to be okay, or it's going to hell in a handbasket, and I got to do something. Where do we line up? And I'm one who says that probably most of the westernized world is operating out of this stage one, fear. It's fear driven, and we cannot. We're naive if we don't think we're affected by that, by these fear messages. It's fear everywhere. And that's stage one thinking, fear, survival. Whether it is true that I have to go out with my bow and arrow and shoot my next meal, shoot and dress my next meal, or I have a $500,000 house with 4 garages on the end, and every garage has a car in it, and I feel I'm insecure and I don't have enough. It's all in the head. And if it's in a person's head, you and I are not going to change it. There's got to be a transformational experience that moves them to the next stage. And I would say that seed coat has to be broken down. And the gospel message is to give us a place to go to be able to let that stuff go. There's got to be a death experience for us to move on to that next stage. Now, also in stage one, I've identified another example following 25:31, where Jacob goes to his brother as a teenager, assumed teenager, and says, "Sell me your birthright." I mean, Jacob set this whole thing up. He knew his brother. I would say he stalked his brother. He had this all set up. He had the pot of soup on the stove. He knew his brother, that he would be famished when he came in after the hunt. And his brother walks in and he smells the aroma of the kitchen. And Jacob says, "I'll give you something. You sell me your birthright." Okay, what is motivating this? I've got I don't have what I need. I have to get more. I have to take. I have to take something from you because I don't have enough. That is a stage 1 example. That right here early on, look at here, Jacob started just like we all start out. We all start out in stage 1. I think I'm just going to leave it there, and we're going to move. We'll do stage 2 next week. We'll move faster because I don't have to explain, all the, all of the slides. We're going to see an example. We're going to see that one introductory slide with the text and the example and the key idea for this stage. And then we're going to move on and give some indicators. Regarding stage 1, these stages, it would be incorrect to think about these as, oh, we're getting better as we go through, or I'm a better person as I move through. I think these are natural stages we all go through, and our ability to transition to the next stage is our ability to put a radical and daily trust in God, to let that go, to be able to move on to what is next. Yes?
It's interesting. I think sometimes when we just get out of college or high school, we get to the point where I almost think we're at stage 7 or something, because we don't care. I mean, YWAM draws from that. I have nothing to lose, so why do I worry about losing anything? Give me my minivan and I'll head across Europe or something like that. And I can live with my backpack. Then as we grow older, we start getting married or having children and kids.
Yeah.
Then we move in. It's sort of like there's a hiccup in the system where we're not really concerned about material things when we're younger. We're carefree. Well, I think it's an illusion, but we are carefree. And then we start to get married, have kids, do things, and then we start building our protection up because we realize it's valuable that we provide this stuff.
Yeah, we can really deceive ourselves, and you're exactly right. And we're going to see that in stage 2. We can see stage 2 in 2 different ways. One is a very immature, naive way of looking. I was there when I first became a believer. Giving it up all and going follow Jesus. But we've got to live some life first before, and it's got to be tested, before we really come to a different understanding of that. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at that very thing in stage 2, which of course we'll look at that next week. And please don't ask, gee, what stage am I in? That's not the point. The point is to give us understanding. Actually, the point is it's going to equip us at this age in life. I think this information could be really helpful as we work with younger people, because I think you're going to click with intuition that, yeah, that is true. That is true. And we've started here. Yes?
Well, that makes me think of an example of the guy sitting on his roof in a flood.
Yes, yeah.
The guy comes in a rowboat and he says, no, I'm waiting on God to get me out of this mess. And
Yeah.
then somebody else comes in a bigger boat, no, I'm waiting on God to get me out of this mess. And then a helicopter comes and I'm waiting for God to get out of this mess. Well, any one of those things, he would have been out of it, but I don't, what were you waiting for?
Yeah. That's a great story. And then he dies and he goes to heaven. He said, well, I was waiting on you and you didn't deliver me. Well, I sent you a helicopter, a boat, and you didn't respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the old preacher that taught, "'Tis a fine line between faith and presumption."
Yeah.
You can sit on a roof and have faith, and your faith says, "Get the boat," or you can presume, and presume till hell freezes over, and then what do you do?
Yeah.
Or like the hunter, the guy going out to hunt.